Welcome to Glow and Tell, a podcast about all things beauty, wellness, and business, sponsored by Artemis, the brand empowering the unsung heroes of beauty and wellness. Welcome to episode 2 of Glow and Tell. I'm so excited to be with you here today to share my personal conventionally unconventional journey to the beauty and wellness space. The reason why I use this paradox, conventionally unconventional, is the fact that I have discussed with thousands and thousands of members of this industry over the past 8 years in which I've been in it, and for almost every single person, the journey to this space has been relatively unconventional. And by unconventional, I mean that we have so many people in this industry that have come from varied backgrounds, that come from other industries, and they have come to this space, some pushed off a cliff into this space, some dipping their toes into this space, from a point of inflection in their lives, from something that really shook them up, from either a challenge or a positive change, but just some moment of pivot in life where they made this choice and this decision to come to this industry with purpose. And it's something that I've found always has been so fascinating to listen to other people within the industry talk about their backgrounds, about how they came here, about what their mission is, what their purpose is, where they feel that they're lending their unique gifts to these industries. Because these industries, as we know, are so important and have such high impact and are so intrinsically linked to the fullness of people's lives. The way that people feel about themselves impacts the way that they're able to show up in the world, not only with their friends and family, but also as professionals, as fellow people. So it has this wide-ranging impact. And there's often this stigma on the beauty industry in particular that it is a superficial industry or an industry that doesn't hold as much weight, for example. Whereas I would argue that the beauty industry is so important, is so impactful, because how people feel is intrinsically linked to how they look, and how they look intrinsically linked to how they feel. And so when we're affecting these things, and when we have clients coming to us saying that they're ready to make these changes, that they feel that they want to take ownership of their bodies, that they want to take ownership of their lives, of how they feel about themselves, of their confidence, of their personal power, we are making massive impact here. And in the wellness space as well, we're putting the power back in the hands of the consumer to really determine what it is that they want, and we guide them along the way. So it's something where I always find these points of relation, these points of inspiration in the stories of others. And I hope that sharing my story fully and transparently, including the challenges along the way, will hopefully lend to some points of relation, reflection, inspiration, and potentially motivation. And that is why I'm so excited to share this story with you all today. And it is a little bit of a winding one, so buckle up and get ready to glow and tell. My journey in career started in the art industry. So I graduated from university with a BFA in photography, and photography was far and away my first love. I can remember I begged my parents for, and this is going to age me a little bit, a point and shoot 35 millimeter camera. And I begged and begged and begged. And I had to wait until I was 10, which at the time felt like an eon away. And I would always be tinkering with my mom and dad's cameras. I just could not wait to get my hands on one. And on my 10th birthday, I will never forget that small Kodak. I will never forget the sound of loading the 35 millimeter film and what it felt like to hold that small object as a piece of solid gold. And I took it with me everywhere. I photographed everything. I was obsessed. It was my passion. It was my purpose. And it was a passion and purpose that I held on to for quite a while after that. So I pursued photography in school. I decided that professionally, that was the direction I wanted to go into. And after leaving university, I started working in the art world. I was working in the space, I was studio managing, and simultaneously working for a photographer in the fashion and editorial space. I was also doing archive work where I was archiving negatives for another photographer as well. And I was really sort of dabbling in these different areas of the art world and seeing where my unique skills might fit in. And it wasn't until maybe a year out from school that I started to really feel like something was missing for me. I felt as though being in school for something I loved so much and having such a rigid structure and a very particular box put around something that was such a passion for me, I personally found that to take some of the joy away from that passion for me and take some of the hunger away from that passion for me as well. And it's certainly not everyone's experience. For some people, it reignites that flame. For me, it was quite difficult to get that flame reignited after school. And I just started to notice that there were things that felt like they were missing. I just felt like there was something more that I wanted to do. There was something more that I was meant to be doing, and I just couldn't scratch that itch. And so before I really had anything else lined up, I decided to slowly take some steps out of the art world. And as a young 20 something in New York City at the time, my cost of living was obviously incredibly high. And I did what any 20 something does at that point, and I got very many part time jobs in the retail space. And one of those jobs was my first foray into the beauty world, which was a job as a retail consultant at Aesop, which is an incredible Australian skincare, body care, and beauty brand. They are so much more than just a brand. They are absolutely a love mark. They are an incredible brand to look at as a beauty and wellness entrepreneur, and even as a beauty and wellness professional, because of their incredible emphasis on the customer experience. And that emphasis on the customer experience is something that I've taken with me now 8 years later. I still think through some of the training and onboarding that I received within that business as an entry level part time retail associate. And I bring that passion with me into the work that I do now. And I find that incredibly interesting and incredibly impactful. One of the things that made that experience so incredibly memorable was the impeccable focus on training and onboarding. So, particularly if you are a beauty or wellness entrepreneur or you're looking to become one, this emphasis on staff training and on staff culture is so incredibly vital to developing your own team as superfans and advocates. And again, here I am 8 years later, still a superfan and still an incredible advocate, not only of the business itself, but of their products. And I am still very much a lifetime consumer as well. So within my tenure at Aesop, I really connected with the fact that they really emphasize the senses within the customer experience. And this was something that I had never seen before. It was something that was very new to me within the retail experience, because every retail job I had previously worked was very transactional in nature. Of course, we were trained to be very attentive to our customers, to ensure that we made our presence known, to be very kind and welcoming. But beyond that, there wasn't a huge amount of interaction between us as the staff and the customers that were entering in and out of our doors. If there was, again, it was very transactional. It was not very personal. It was not very human centric. There was definitely nothing that was playing to the senses within those particular roles or those particular businesses. And ESOP was the first place that I really realized, wow, the impact of the senses, the impact of this customer experience from the second that they walk in the door, or even if they don't walk in the door at all, they were having an ESOP experience, and their experience was consistent no matter which store they went to around the world, which is just an incredible, incredible thing when you consider how much work that takes to get there, how much thought that takes, how much strategy that takes to build. And so, how that worked at ESOP within this context was that we were really focused on engaging with the customer in a very connected and human way. And we were also really focused on having the customer engage with their senses. And so the second they walked in the door, they would smell the ESOP essential oil blend that was always burning within the store. We would sometimes rotate out that blend for seasonal product launches, and it was always something that was highly complementary to any promotional opportunities we were offering. We then would have taste be something that happened quite quickly because we would offer our customers, no matter who they were, we would offer a tea in the winter and we would offer lemon water in the summer. It was something that was a pivotal part of our customer experience, was to walk over to every customer that entered the door with the tea or water in hand and offer it to them as a hospitality offering. And it's very disarming to offer to your customers, some of which are just walking in to browse, the same level of customer experience that you're offering to a customer who might be a high ticket item spender. It just shows that value, that level of attention to quality. So there we have our scent, we have our taste, and then next we have our sight. And every ESOP store was very unique. It was very well designed by incredible architects, but also we were trained very well to keep the stores immaculate. So all of the bottles and the designs were well lined. It was always an incredible display, and we always kept everything incredibly clean so that the customer would walk in and have this amazing visual experience. Again, another sense. But at that time, when I was working at ESOP, what we would do is we would always be incentivized to bring our customers to the sink. The sink was a pivotal point. It was the central point of every single ESOP store. And our key goal for every customer that walked in the door was to get them to the sink. And if you got them to the sink, you would be really engaging their sense of touch because you would use the products that they're interested in. You would perform a consultation with them, and you would then demonstrate what those products feel like on the skin, how they lather, how they should be applied, what they feel like, what they smell like. And so we're re-engaging these different senses, what they look like. And all of a sudden, someone that might have just come in on a whim or a happenstance was getting a full consultation. And if they ended up leaving at the end of that consultation without a purchase, they were treated with the same hospitality as someone who walked in and made a high ticket purchase. And it was that attention to quality and seeing the incredible reactions and disarming of people walking in and how special they felt and how welcome they felt as a result of these really small, simple, but impactful ways of interacting with customers and this customer experience, this attention to detail. It was amazing to me. I was so floored. And most of all, I believed wholeheartedly in the products. And I just ate up all the knowledge I possibly could and was so excited. I never thought of myself as someone who would be in the beauty space. I always thought that, I was very much too cool for school when it came to beauty. But when I saw that and the impacts that that then had on people, and how people would be so excited and come back so excited and come back as these loyal advocates of the brand and of the products, and how their skin would change and how they would just be so glowy and excited about that, that really was impactful for me as, just a part-time retail associate who was all of a sudden having impact. And simultaneously, as this is going on, and as I'm in a sort of transitional period when it comes to career and sorting out what it is that I really want to do in life, I had been dealing with personal physical and mental health issues for more than half of my life. I likely, when I wasn't working, was in a doctor's office of some kind. I have probably visited at one time or another every single specialist that exists under the sun. I've probably gotten every single evaluation that exists under the sun because I spent over 6 years looking for a diagnosis for an autoimmune disease that I was dealing with from the time that I was a young teenager. And I always looked at that as something to push through, as something that I needed to get through in order to be able to show up productively in the world, in order to be able to do the things I quote unquote needed to do. And I never saw it as something that would in any way impact my career. If anything, I saw it as something that could possibly inhibit my career because I was so worried about my symptoms and my illness coming in the way of me showing up in the world in the ways that I wanted to. And for me at that point, health and wellness didn't feel possible. They didn't feel accessible to me. They felt like these unattainable dreams that other people got to experience, but that I unfortunately would never achieve and I could never have. They were things that I thought about constantly. Every day, I would just say, I just want to feel better. I just want to feel better. And I didn't necessarily realize the correlation between the work that I had started to do at ESA and this mulling around of something feeling like it was missing. And then the experience that I was having on the other end, this incredibly challenging, incredibly debilitating, incredibly traumatizing experience that I had been living in for 7, 8 years, for the better part of my life at that time. And it wasn't until that point that I got a diagnosis on my autoimmune disease that I had been dealing with, that I got a plan of action for treatment that was unfortunately just as complicated as getting a diagnosis in the first place. And once I had that diagnosis and I had that treatment plan, I thought, okay, this is it. I'm going to get better. I have some hope now. I have a trajectory. And again, I was thinking, once I get better, I can show up in a different way at work. I can have more energy for myself, for what I want to do personally. I'd never even thought about what I wanted to do personally because there was just no energy. There was no time. I was giving everything I had left to appear quote unquote normal. And it's paradoxical and slightly funny because the word normal had become such a swear word to me, because when I was searching for diagnosis, the thing I heard over and over again was everything came back normal. Everything came back normal. You're completely fine. You're completely healthy. Everything looks normal. And I had just grown this sense of resentment for that word normal. And yet my entire life was centered around needing to appear normal and trying to be normal in what I conceptualized that word to mean. And so as I started on this journey of treating this illness, I went about it the only way that I knew how, which was the conventional route. And I went about it with a lot of hope. I thought that once I knew what it was, I would be able to treat it easily. Unfortunately, that wasn't my experience. And I got sicker. And it's not everybody's experience. It unfortunately was mine. And I had a moment where I really was forced to take a step back and look at what was happening and see that it was happening within the framework of what I understood. It was happening within the framework of what I had always known and what I had always been taught about how health works and how wellness works and what you do when you're sick. When you're sick, I was taught that, you go to the doctor, you get a pill, and you feel better. And that had never been my experience. I had always had confusion, had uncertainty, had question marks. And it's funny how often we stay in this uncertainty because it's all we've ever known. And it was at that point that I decided to take my first, I would say, of many big leaps in my life. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to seek some other options here. I'm going to take a look and see what I might be able to find. And from that came the discovery of what I now know to be the wellness industry, what I now know to be a wealth of knowledge and modalities and methods that, especially when integrated with conventional methods, are so incredibly impactful for a more holistic healing of our body, but also of our mind. Our mind is such an important and integral part of any journey, of any healing journey, of any beauty journey, of any wellness journey. Our mind plays a pivotal role. And that was something that had been so ignored in my process up until that point that it was a little bit scary. I'll be honest. It was a little bit scary to peek under the hood there. So it was through a process of real trial and error that I was able to develop a team around me of certified professionals that were able to really guide me in a more integrative approach that for me personally was just so much more effective because it really took into consideration these components that are so important. These components like diet, like exercise, like nutrition, like supplementation, all of these things that to me had never been discussed, had always been ignored as things that maybe just didn't have as much of an impact. And I was able to really customize my journey to what I really needed and the support that I needed. And it's so important to have that support from those licensed professionals and have the support in the ways that you need it, especially when all you want is to feel better. And that's what ended up happening for me. Little by little, very slowly, I started to feel better. And that was something that I had never thought would be possible for me. It was at most a long distant hope. To be completely transparent, it was a hope that I had let go of many times because it was too painful to hold on to something that I thought was a fantasy. And having it become a reality, having it come to me, and then realizing how every single aspect of my life changed when I started to feel better was mind-boggling. It was so incredibly eye-opening to me that all I wanted for so long was to feel better. And that when I started to feel better, my entire life changed. How I looked changed. How I showed up in the world changed. How I communicated changed. What I was able to do changed. My energy changed. Everything changed. And I was able to really take a step back and take a look at my own relationship to my body. And my relationship to my body from the time I was a young teenager, was this relationship of hatred, this relationship of resentment, of feeling betrayed by my body, of feeling like I was fighting with my body, of feeling in constant conflict with my body because I felt like it was not fighting hard enough, or it was fighting me, or I wanted to do things that my body was saying, no, we can't, we're trying to heal. And that recognition that I was able to come from a place of, in my darkest days of my health, not being able to walk, not being able to bathe myself, not being able to talk on the phone, to come from that place to a place of being able to go for walks, to being able to now, as a 30-year-old, be an athlete, consider myself an athlete, to be a climber, to be doing acro multiple times a week. I was just able to realize the immense power of feeling better, of feeling well. And it's fascinating when we tie that back to beauty, because I was so focused for so much of my life on feeling better that the idea of feeling beautiful could not have been further off my radar. But what I realized is I was still feeling the effects of that. I was still feeling so insecure because I didn't feel good in my body and I didn't feel good in my mind. And I didn't feel beautiful for a really long time. For most of my life, I struggled with feeling really, really not beautiful. And it wasn't until I started to see how my face changed, how my skin changed, how my whole body changed when I came back into balance. I used to have gray skin. I was so ill that my body was just struggling so much that I didn't have the circulation, the oxygen, the nutrients that I needed. And my body reflected that. When there is imbalance, our body reflects that. And you start to lose that feeling of balance and confidence that is the definition of beauty. And I am so grateful now to have the knowledge that I have, that I've gained from this personal experience, that has led me to this industry. So it was at that point that I knew where my pivot was. My pivot was to wellness. I wanted to help other people to feel better in the ways that I had, because I saw how incredibly impactful that was on people's lives. And I wanted to ensure that I was using my own lived experience to transmute, to communicate, to relate to people who are really, really struggling, who are just wanting to feel better. And I decided to take a role as a patient services coordinator at a very busy acupuncture practice in New York City. And day after day, I saw patient after patient and saw the incredible results they were getting. And these were patients who oftentimes, like me, had very complicated cases that were very difficult to treat, very difficult symptoms, debilitating issues that they were dealing with. And I saw them coming back week after week, and they were looking different. They were feeling different. They were communicating differently. The second they walked in the door, I knew that they were feeling different. They didn't even have to say it to me because I could see it. And it's that transformation that has always driven me ever since to these industries. So then came another pivot. I decided that the way that I thought in the moment I could make the most impact was as an acupuncturist, because from my framework, from my own experience, that was the way that I thought I could make the most impact, the way I could help the most people feel good, and the way that I knew to do so. So I decided to go back to school, get my health science degree, and I made a plan that in 2 years I was going to uproot my boyfriend at the time, our 2 dogs, and our 2 cats, and we were going to move to Boulder, Colorado so that I could pursue my dual master's and doctorate degree in acupuncture. Fortunately, and I say fortunately because the story does have a very happy ending, my schedule would not align with my patient services coordinator schedule. So I had to pursue a new job, a new part-time job, or at least a new job that I could do alongside my schooling. I went to Trusty Indeed, which is a hilarious origin for this story. And I found a role that looked absolutely perfect. It was afternoon shifts. It was something I could do alongside school. It was in the wellness space. It was something that would allow me to learn about new modalities, which I was always so excited about. Learn about things like whole body cryotherapy, infrared sauna, all of these innovative and different treatments that I hadn't tried yet myself. I went to the interview, and that is the day that I met our founder at Artemis, Simon Mansell, for the first time. And he asked me a question during that interview that I will transparently never forget. And if you are a entrepreneur of any kind, if you are a hiring manager, if you employ anyone or are ever interviewing anyone, or maybe if you're on a date, you might want to ask this too. And the question he asked me midway through our conversation was, "What makes you angry?" And it was such a disarming question in the middle of an interview because we all go into interviews and we want to present the best, most polished versions of ourselves. And it was just such a great question to really hit into the core of a person. And it was at a time where I was not very comfortable with the emotion of anger. And so I believe my response was something to the effect of, "It really frustrates me when communication is not honest, clear, and direct," which probably remains one of the things that does frustrate me in life. And I got the job. I started up at this brick and mortar wellness space called Cryofuel in Tribeca in New York City. It was an incredible wellness studio. It was one with a fantastic mission. And it was ultimately the reason why Artemis is what it is today, because it was our stomping ground. It was our testing ground. We were able to access so many people. We were able to tap into so many networks. We had some great partnerships. I met amazing people while working there. But my plan was always to leave after the end of the 2 years and head off to Colorado to pursue what I thought to be my purpose at the time, which was acupuncture. And I was so excited to co-manage this brick and mortar practice and really get embedded and learn more and more. I am a lifelong student. I love to learn. I'm hungry for knowledge. And so learning about these different wellness modalities was so fascinating to me. So when Simon came to me in September of 2017 and asked me to fly to Europe to do the original training for our first launch device as Artemis, I was a little skeptical, I'll be honest, about the claims that it was making. It was a beauty device. It was something that was very different for us. We were very much in the wellness space, although all of our wellness devices at the time had beauty benefits, which is why I continue to come back to the intrinsic link between wellness and beauty. When we feel good, we look good. When we look good, we feel good. It is just a constant loop that it feeds back into itself. And I decided to go. I went in as a healthy skeptic. I know a lot of you in the industry will know this as well, that in the beauty and wellness industry, we have to be very careful because there is, as with any industry, a lot of snake oil that does happen in these industries. And that unfortunately is a stigma that's put on our industries as well, that we're often positioning against when we're talking to our clients, as well as talking to our team and getting their buy-in. And I am ever the healthy skeptic. So when I went into the training, I was, just healthily skeptical, but open-minded. And I was blown away by the incredible results of this device called CryoSkin. So much so that when I came back to the US with the device to integrate into the cryofuel business, I was so excited to translate that training to the team and get them just as confident and eager as I was to introduce this to our clientele, because I knew it was going to be a huge hit. What we ended up seeing was a tripling of our revenue from this device in the first 90 days that it was in our location, from which Simon's entrepreneurial gears started turning. His mission in life, his personal purpose, his professional purpose is to create more entrepreneurs and make entrepreneurship more accessible to people who want to start businesses. And he just realized that he couldn't keep this amazing secret to himself. And that was where Artemis was born. And I started to have this nagging feeling as I watched Artemis be born that maybe I wasn't quite done in New York yet. Maybe I hadn't quite finished my tenure there. And to test the waters, I sent an email to Simon and asked him whether there was an opportunity for me at Artemis if I were to stay. He responded back that if I were to stay, he would offer me the head of training position with Artemis. And this was a huge surprise to me. I had trained before in terms of training employees at most businesses I had worked with, but I had never had any formal training or education experience or background, and I knew it would be a huge leap for me. So the first thing that came to my mind was this incredible imposter syndrome. I can't take this job. I don't know what I'm doing. How could I possibly? I might fail. What happens if I let people down? What if I make the wrong choice? What if I shouldn't do this? This seems like something so different for me. I am scared. I don't know what to do. And all of those things were running through my head. What if I'm not good enough? What if nobody likes the work that I do? But I decided to take the leap anyway. And I still to this day think it's the best decision I've ever made, both in my personal and professional life, or at least one of the top three. And I took that big leap. I decided to feel into that fear, say thank you to the fear, and do it anyway. And I have grown insurmountably, and I cannot even describe the level of growth that I've achieved, both personally and professionally, since making that decision, which is to say that if you are offered an opportunity, or if you are dreaming about something, if you are thinking that you want to start that business, if you're thinking that you want to branch out, that you want to pivot, there is always opportunity to do so. There is always opportunity to do so, but it requires that leap. It requires that trust in yourself, in your worth, in your skills. And it requires you to also humble yourself and ask for support where you need it. Look for resources, listen to podcasts, do your research. It really is such a lesson in taking a big jump and just trusting that you will get there as long as you do the work. And it is an incredible thing when you take a leap and you work hard and you believe and you trust that you will do it. What comes to you as a result? It's magic is the word I would use. That's the formal term for it. So that has been a little bit about my journey. I have navigated through Artemis in the past 5.5 years, and I'm still very happily here now as the VP of brand for the business. That is how I got to where I am today. I will be transparent that this podcast is another big leap for me. I have had a lot of imposter syndrome come up for me. Believe me, it never stops. But we just get a little bit better at facing it and kind of talking to the voice in our head that tells us that we can't do it, that we're not good enough, that someone else could do it better, or that we're going to make mistakes or we're going to fail. And the thing is, we are going to fail. We are going to learn lessons. We are not always going to get it right. We're not always going to be perfect. There is no such thing as perfection, because perfection as we imagine it only comes from lessons and lessons and lessons and lessons. Success as we imagine it only comes from failures and failures and failures. And we only reach success if we learn from our failures and commit to acting differently. I'll leave you with one of my favorite quotes, and something that I think about quite often in both my personal and professional life, which is remembering that old keys will never open new doors. So if you need some inspiration, some motivation, to change those actions, to change those habits, to think back on those failures that felt so challenging in the moment and so gut-wrenching, what can we learn from them? What can we commit to doing differently? Because that's really where the juice is in the journey. That's where we're going to skyrocket to our success, where we're going to skyrocket to our happiness, to our beauty, to our health, to our wellness. Before we sign off for this episode, I'm going to let you in on a little secret of what we're going to be asking our guests on every podcast episode at the end of each episode, which is, what does beauty mean to you and what does wellness mean to you? And so I wanted to give you my personal answers to those questions on today's episode to cap us off. For me, beauty and wellness are one and the same. You can't have one without the other. When you look good, you feel good. When you feel good, you look good. And to me, when I think about the most beautiful people that I know or have encountered, they are people who you feel walk into the room before you see them. And that is really what it comes down to. It's that incredible radiance. It's that incredible wellness, that balance, the way that they carry themselves, their confidence, their personal power. And all of that comes from a place of wellness because they've achieved that level of balance. And it's not about being perfect all the time. There is a common misconception in the beauty and wellness space, in my opinion, that it's about achieving some particular ideal or some version of perfection. And at least for me personally, imperfection is beautiful, and imperfection is also part of life. We can't, as human beings, be perfect, but we can strive for balance. We can notice when we're out of balance. We can have tools in our toolkit that we use to get ourselves back into balance. And that is beautiful in and of itself to me. The journey is beautiful in and of itself to me. Effort, just trying, just doing anything, small steps. That's beauty. That's wellness. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time on Glow and Tell. Thank you for listening to Glow and Tell. Please like, subscribe, comment, and follow anywhere where you listen to podcasts. We'll see you next time.